They come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I bought a dog that killed the calf that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hello! It's hot, hot, hot. It's the dog days of August, which means that here in Southern California, there's only 3 more months of summer left. But we have a great show for you. Now, I have spoken frequently of my affection for MeTV, the network. You know, for me, it's television comfort food. Star Trek, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Perry Mason. Now, these were not the shows on in prime time when I was a kid, but they were the shows that were in reruns and in syndication when I was a kid. They were the shows that were on 5 days a week in Boston on good old Channel 56 or Channel 38. And so these were the shows that I grew up watching every day after school. I'm sure that's true for so many of you as well. Well, as it turns out, most, not all, but most of these shows all came from the same TV season. Star Trek, Batman, The Monkees, Lost in Space. The network television season that began in the fall of 1966 was the first all-color television season in America. It was really the dawn of the modern television age. And of course, all of the stuff that we see today, business-wise, trend-wise, it was already going on back then. Well, there is a new book about it called PrimeTime 66-67 by Tom Shubilla. And he is here to talk about that very book. And then, one of the giants of that era in television was Irwin Allen. Irwin Allen gave us Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Lost in Space, Land of the Giants, The Time Tunnel, and then he turned to the big screen and gave us the Poseidon Adventure, the Towering Inferno, a true giant of 60s TV and 70s film. And my very good friend, Bond, Jeff Bond, has a new massive book. It's not even a book, it's a tome called The Fantasy Worlds of Irwin Allen, and he is here to talk about that. True Tales from Weirdsville is taking a deep dive into the mind of Bob Rafelson, who not only created that gem of the 1966 TV season, The Monkees, but also made the Monkees movie, Head, which is really about what a jerk you are if you like the Monkees. And it starred the Monkees. And then he made Easy Rider and 5 Easy Pieces. You know, just cause. If you're a fan of True Tales from Weirdsville, then you might like The Cinemorph, a twice-weekly column written by yours truly, sent directly to your mailbox. You have to read it to yourself, but I do write it for you. The Cinemorph. Just go to danagould.bulletin.com. Twice weekly to your mailbox. Free and worth it. And now, plugs! Hooray! The Joyride album featuring Bobcat Goldthwait and myself is now out on 800 Pound Gorilla for download. And the Blu-ray of the film is available through Amazon, or if you are from the UK, Amazon. Hanging with Dr. Z is available for your viewing pleasure on YouTube, and an announcement about Season 3 is coming your way. Watch this space. And lastly, thank God, if you like the show, please consider being a Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. Go to danagould.com and sign up for our Patreon. $5 a month gets you extra audio content, video content, and some other junk. We don't have graduated levels. $5 a month, and you get some stuff. Don't be a shy cadet, be a Sky Cadet. At $5 a month, it's a simple deal for complicated times. And now, it's on to our filthy business.
It's showtime.
My guest today is a very good friend of mine, I am proud to say. He was an editor at the late, great Cinefantastique, also known as CFQ, possibly returning at some point. You were an editor at Geek Monthly. You've written two amazing books, one of specifically that we're going to talk today. You've written several books, but you wrote a book last year, I think it came out last year, about the art and production design of Star Trek The Motion Picture, which is a gorgeous book. And then there's this book, which is just astounding. It's called The Fantasy Worlds of Irwin Allen. And what is amazing about this book is that Irwin Allen is ubiquitous to everything people of a certain age with a certain interest level grew up gorging themselves on. With the exception of Star Trek, it was all Irwin Allen. And right as show business caught up with him, he aged out of it. That's what I find so interesting, that he was the top of the heap. And then when everybody started doing what he did, he kind of skipped a beat. It's a perfect story. It's a perfect show business story. But his resume, he had three or four giant careers. He was the king of fantasy television in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He had Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, The Time Tunnel, Land of the Giants. All of these shows were on the air at the same time. They were all his shows. And then he went into creating the Poseidon Adventure, the Towering Inferno. He invented the disaster craze that struck movies in the late 70s, in the mid 70s. Anyway, the author of The Fantasy Worlds of Irwin, I want to talk about him today because he is such a legendary influence, but not one of those names. Like all the names before Lucas and Spielberg tend to get lost in the shuffle. But he was so important. He's such a tentpole of the genre. Please welcome Jeff Bond.
Thank you for having me. This is the sound of my voice, right? That's what I was supposed to say.
You did it.
I want to thank you for having me on the show. First of all, it sounds like you actually read the book, which is you might be the first person I know of who actually read the whole narrative. And I just want to say I tried to do podcasts for about a month, and I know how difficult it is to get guests. So I just want you to, don't get discouraged, Dana, because you had to have me on your show. I know you're going to be able to get much better guests.
Oh, heavens! Oh no, Lord knows, we have our own barrel.
Exactly.
As I've said before, this is the target audience of this podcast is men my age who are me.
That was the target audience of my podcast. That's why it lasted for 1 month.
This is the stuff.
I was the only man my age like me, apparently.
Yeah, that's why I miss Gilbert. It's like, no, this was the thing that I did.
Yep.
But we're of a certain age, and I think anybody that grew up with Lost in Space more than anything else, and the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno is a whole separate area. What's amazing about Irwin Allen is this guy made lightning strike 3-4 times. Most people, they get it once and they're good.
Yeah,
if at all.
Allen had an amazing career. He did a lot of stuff on kind of under the radar. That he worked as an agent, and he's in a way he kind of invented packaging. Getting a bunch of different talents, actors together and packaging them to make movies. He was originally kind of like covering entertainment as a journalist in Hollywood.
Yeah, he had he had like a gossip show on the radio.
Shows, and he did. You could almost go into him being on the cutting edge of like creating game shows and stuff. And then he kind of leveraged that into being an agent at a big Hollywood agency and started packaging talent together for movie deals. And then he leveraged that into becoming like a movie producer and started doing films at RKO. And he was a great schmoozer and loved he loved Hollywood and he loved stars. So some of the first things he did was he made like 2 movies with Groucho Marx. Then he and Groucho Marx, became best pals.
This is to place it. He came up in Hollywood in the 40s, a very young man.
Right.
Irwin Allen really is someone who was born at the right time for his skill set. Mm-hmm. And he really met his moment. And he was just pure enthusiasm and exuberance. Like, the one thing that I get from the book and from reading his story is that he loved his work. He was incredibly passionate, incredibly exuberant, and was very much a kid. I mean, one of the reasons that his work is so timeless and still around is that he, again, like he made what he wanted to see. His first, after he made the movies of the Groucho, he made Animal World, which was this giant dinosaur movie, like before when making dinosaur movies was difficult. He really was. He loved what he was doing.
Yeah, there's this story. When I was working on the book, I found this great old production illustrator, Joe Musso, who had, he contributed so many of the kind of personal stories for the book. And he was telling me that, there was some famous story about Irwin when he was an agent that he would, bring clients in, and he had this collection of like wind up toys, and they would hear him, in his office, like basically playing with these toys. Like when he had clients in, he was entertaining them, by showing off these toys. And that was like a real key. He had absolutely had his finger, on the pulse of what a 10-year-old would want to see in movies. And he got lucky, so many times. He made a few films at RKO, but he wasn't super happy because he didn't have independence and control over everything that he was doing. So he kind of put together another package and adapted this book, The Sea Around Us, which was this, very big tome that everybody had read about the ocean. It's a very serious book. And he basically just got together a bunch of stock footage from, fishermen, and compiled this movie. And it was his first independent production, but he had a lot of underwater footage. And at that point,
that was really rare.
It was cutting edge, to show like life underwater. So he puts together this movie that's just a clip show of stock footage of marine life. And he immediately wins an Oscar for it. He basically beats Jacques Cousteau to the punch, because Jacques Cousteau, I think a year or two later, did his documentary which he actually had to film. He put 1,000 times more effort into it than
Irwin Allen did the Ed Wood version. What do you got?
Exactly. But that's the one that wins the Oscar, and that's what launched his career as kind of an independent filmmaker. And he used stock footage almost throughout his career, and some of his like biggest projects, were built around the idea of like, we're going to save money by using somebody else's footage.
That's amazing. Well, I wanted to rewind for a moment about the two films at RKO. So he's he's a gossip, basically a gossip columnist. He gets into agenting, but he's in the 40s and 50s, a gadfly. He's kind of got his hands in a lot of pots. And he becomes friends with Groucho Marx, and they want to do a movie at RKO. And RKO at the time was actively run by Howard Hughes. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to make a movie at RKO with Howard Hughes, you're going to have Howard Hughes' girlfriend, Jane Russell, in it. Right. And so it's Groucho Marx and Jane Russell, and then they get Frank Sinatra to be in it. And apparently Irwin and Frank didn't mix well.
Right, a very unhappy Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, a very unhappy Frank Sinatra. And I think Irwin Allen's quote about Frank Sinatra was, "A horrible little man."
Yeah, he got along with most. Frank was like the exception to the rule, where he was the one guy that he didn't get along with.
Yeah, there was a quote, as I forget what it was, but it's something along the lines of, I think it was Will. Will Rogers was famous for saying, I never met a man I didn't like." And I believe there was a quote: "Will Rogers never met Val Kilmer."
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He's not a storyteller. He's all about the big idea.
Yeah.
And, because he does the undersea world, and okay, we got that. And then his next was every animal from dinosaurs forward, animal world.
Yep.
And then, how about this for a movie? The story of mankind.
It doesn't get any bigger than that.
And tell the plot of the story of mankind if you've never seen it.
Well, he has.
Speaking of Vincent Price.
Vincent Price plays the devil, or Mr. Scratch, I think is his name. And it's like a Star Trek episode. He puts mankind on trial.
On trial, yeah.
I love this movie as a kid. And there's this great kind of limbo set with like where they're on trial on top of the clouds.
Yeah.
And that's where all the money went. And then everything else is stock footage because this was another thing where he's like, I've got this great idea. You got all this historical, footage, and we can make this whole movie based around that.
The movie should have been called Everything.
Yeah. and then we get, a bunch of stars, including Groucho Marx, and, for like cameo roles to show the different famous stories in history. I think Peter Lorre's in it.
It stars Ronald Colman and Hedy Lamarr, the Marx brothers.
Yep.
We're all in it. Virginia Mayo, Agnes Moorehead, Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, young James Coburn, Cedric Hardwicke, Cesar Romero, Dennis Hopper is in it.
I remember Dennis Hopper, I think, plays Napoleon, and I think he might have been cut out of it. And I can't for the life of me remember what James Coburn does. If he's
also is cut out of Time Tunnel, I think.
Yeah. He got cut out of a lot of things.
Yeah. And then he makes again with Victor Mature and Vincent Price, The Big Circus. You're like, we're going to the circus.
Have you seen The Big Circus?
I've not seen The Big Circus.
The Big Circus is. I had never seen it until I started researching this book. It got obscure. I think it's. I don't know whether
What's
it's
the one
American.
with Charlton Heston?
That's The Greatest Show on Earth.
Greatest Show on Earth, right?
And which is a crashing bore,
right?
And The Big Circus is Irwin did a lot of movies like this that were like taking advantage of a previous hit by someone else.
Right.
But the funny thing about The Big Circus, and Irwin was obsessed with circuses. He always wanted to make even in the 70s, he was going to make some gigantic 3D circus film, which he never got around to making. But The Big Circus is weirdly one of Irwin's best movies, I think. It actually has a pretty coherent plot. It's got a really good cast, and it's got some great action, some great visual stuff. And if you stack it up against The Greatest Show on Earth, like to me,
this has a guy going across the Niagara Falls on a tightrope.
Yeah. It's much more fun than Greatest Show on Earth, which is kind of just pompous.
Yeah.
And he got a great screenwriter that he worked with in a bunch of projects. He was one of Alfred Hitchcock's guys. And there's some actually pretty good dialogue in The Big Circus. And this guy worked with him on his next few movies, I think, like Lost World, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. But The Big Circus, I think, was American International or some weird, it fell between the cracks.
You know what the movie is from the idea.
Yeah.
The Big Circus. Like he would have made Titanic. Like Titanic. You know what it is. It's a one-word pitch.
Well, and he does Titanic, in the time tunnel.
Right.
So he... after he did The Big Circus, then he goes to 20th Century Fox, and that's kind of the studio that creates the Irwin Allen brand.
Right.
It
was also a perfect studio for him at that time because 20th Century Fox always seemed to be on the verge of bankruptcy or just recovering from being on the verge of bankruptcy before dipping back down to the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah, they wind up. In fact, that almost bookends Allen's career at the studio, because he comes in right as they're crashing from Cleopatra.
Right.
And they've got everything shut down, but they had this guy, William Self, is starting up Fox's television production. And that was something like really new for Fox, and the studios were just kind of starting to really develop TV programs that had production value.
So let me give you a little bit background, because we've actually talked about this on the podcast before. 20th Century Fox's film Cleopatra went wildly over budget, wildly over schedule. They ended up, Daryl Zanuck, who built the studio, had gone off to become an independent producer. The studio is now being run by this money guy named Spyros Skouras. He sold off half the backlot to what is now Century City Shopping Mall, the world's ugliest shopping center. And they were, and then Spyros Skouras is fired, and then Daryl Zanuck, and in a fit of nepotism, appoints his son to run the studio, who actually turns out to be incredibly competent. Which is like the great left turn of the story. He brings it, he goes, "Why don't you do it?" And his son is great. And he manages to keep the studio afloat. They close everything down. They fire everybody just to keep it going, and then it's the TV business that keeps the lights on. And into this void steps Irwin Allen.
Yeah, he had started doing these movies for Fox. He'd done like The Lost World with lizards instead of dinosaurs.
Right. Now, if you haven't seen the remake of The Lost World that Irwin Allen made, you have to see it, because they take monitor lizards and then they just put like a Triceratops hood on them.
Right.
You're good.
And if you've seen any...
Also with Victor Mature. Again, with Victor Mature.
If you've seen any Irwin Allen TV show, you have seen The Lost World, because he puts the lizard footage in every episode.
Yeah. But if you ever see a lot of those in the 50s, it was going to be an alternative to stop motion animation, where they would just put monitor lizards basically in hats.
Yeah, and make them fight each other, and
which they don't want to do.
Who cares what happened? Yeah,
which they
set them on fire. So he had made this Lost World, then he made Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, a feature film. Like I said, around this time, this television department starts going, and they start making shows like Daniel Boone and Peyton Place.
Right.
And these start becoming successful. Yeah.
Peyton Place is huge.
Become really big hits. And so Allen he first tried to sell them like an anthology series of stories by who's I'm blanking on
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe, yeah.
Because that was the heyday of Alfred Hitchcock Presents,
Twilight
Boris Karloff's Thriller. I got one.
So his idea was he was going to have a detective who would go through all of the different stories by Edgar Allan Poe. They couldn't sell that one, but then he sells them this package of like, well, wait, we just made this movie Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. We've got all these miniatures and sets, still sitting around at the studio that cost a fortune, and we can make a TV show based on that, and we'll just use all the stock footage from the movie. And he sold him on this idea, and he winds up making a pretty expensive pilot. He films it in color because he's kind of thinking ahead. At that, I think this was done in '64, and or maybe even a little before that when they were actually producing it. And you were just starting to see some color shows, but most shows were still in black and white until about 65, 66. Right. But he films the pilot in color, and he gets on the air. They have a black and white first season. Second season of the show, and I think, I remember as a kid, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, that being on television in color, like anytime you were around that show and it was, on a television set, you were just like riveted. Like, what the hell is this? It's color. There's giant monsters. They're underwater.
It's two shows. It's two different shows. The black and white Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is a Cold War spy show.
Yeah, it's a spy show.
And everything is very plausible and gritty. And then they go to color. And not only do they go to color, they go to primary color. Like,
right.
This is the beginning of color television. We need it as colorful as you can make it.
Yeah.
Bright yellow flying sub, bright colors. But the monsters are insane. It was what people think of as the lunacy of Lost in Space. And if you've never really watched Lost in Space, you really owe it to yourself to go back and watch it, because you won't believe it was a show. You really won't believe that this was a TV show.
Yeah,
they goddamn insane.
Yeah, they become super crazy, and that
moisture.
Voice of the Sea. Their main competition the first year was the Man from U.N.C.L.E.,
right?
Which was also in black and white. And
again, cashing in on the spy craze.
Yeah, and the Man from U.N.C.L.E. started getting crazy as more and more James Bond. And so at the very beginning of the color season, the second season of Voyage of the Sea, they were really going all in, trying to do. It's just going to be a spy. If this is going to be James Bond, we're going to have all this gadgetry and we'll have hot women and go to Italy and stuff. And they tried that for about 4 or 5 episodes, and then sort of, I think, accidentally had a monster, on one of they had a giant monster in one of the shows. I think it was like a giant Portuguese man of war or something.
Yeah.
And that just went through the roof in ratings, and it was instantly clear this is what we need to do.
Amazing.
So then it was literally just like, what monster are we going to have this week? And this guy, Paul Zastupnovich, who was the costume designer, would design all the monsters and literally just be putting tree bark or
and for those of you who they're bad, but they're bad in a beautiful way. Like the monsters in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and then later in Lost in Space, which we'll get to. They're bad in the way that the Ramones were not exquisite musicians.
right.
But it works perfectly.
They riff on, they take advantage of it was a very naive period. Nobody knew, nobody could say that there wasn't a giant, 700-foot gill man walking around the Pacific Ocean at that point. They were just beginning to explore the ocean. So there was a certain amount.
So naturally, a creature that lived on the bottom of the ocean would walk.
Yeah. Well, my favorite of all of these is there's an episode where a guy gets turned into a giant, and it's literally all these episodes. It inevitably would lead to this giant monster who was it had to be a guy in a suit,
right?
Underwater in the tank at Fox, wrestling with this 8-foot-long Seaview miniature. And my favorite one is they just make a guy, a scientist.
Yes.
So it's like Seaview versus the guy in a sweater.
And it's literally that. It is literally that.
And you're just thinking this poor guy is trying to keep, he doesn't have any weights on his feet, which you have to keep the buoyancy. And so he's constantly struggling to stay at the same level that the Seaview is at, and it's just looks like it's just torture. And at least in some of the shots, it's the actual actor. This guy, he's the one who plays the Plutonian guy with psychic powers in one of the worst Star Trek episodes. But in this one, and he was
That's
sort
a tall order, my friend.
Yeah, sort of a dignified actor, and I just always imagine the day they told him, you're going in that tank and you're wrestling that submarine, mister.
Well, that's what I love. It's your I have it right here. I'll find the name. It's right there.
Yep, that's it. You're gonna throw that rock.
I'm looking at Jeff's book, and for those of you listening at home, it's literally a guy in a pair of pants and a shirt underwater somehow. And there's the Seaview, which is like the size of an aircraft carrier, but it's a submarine, and a really beautiful design too. If you've never seen it, it was just a gorgeous design. And he's just underwater wrestling with the sea.
The one thing that Irwin Allen had, I think he did have great taste at, was kind of contributing to the look of all the spaceships and the vehicles on his show. And that, that's sort of like, to me, Voyage of Odyssey had a really good actor, Richard Basehart, as the star of the show. But as a kid, you just want to watch the sea view and the flying sub.
Sure,
and that's all you care about.
And they were for those of you, again, in the book, your quote for the photo of this guy is the sea view versus a guy in a sweater in season 2's Leviathan. Yeah, and then there were some other photos where you can see scuba divers in the lower corner of the screen trying to get out of the shot.
Those are outtakes, but there are several points, in the show where you can see that. And, they made this for TV screens of the era, which were low definition. And when you watch it, even on the DVDs, which are not HD, but they're very nicely cleaned up and sharp. And on those, you can definitely see, divers lurking in the background of some of the shots.
God, it makes me laugh so hard. So, and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, again, now we're in like 1966, right. 65, 66, and really the pop 60s is taking hold.
Yeah, they do.
Batman is starting to be shot on the same lot.
Yeah, Vincent Price plays Egghead on Batman. And then winds up playing like some puppet master villain on Voyage of the Bottom. So they started doing these goofy episodes where they make puppets of the stars. It starts getting really ridiculous. I think torture for the actor, Richard Basehart sort of famously dived into alcoholism to kind of get through that. It was the most successful of Allen's shows in terms of running, ran for 4 seasons. And it's almost like the network forgot it was on. So it's on Sunday night, which was a huge night. It was like, I think 7:00 on Sunday when they'd be showing, the Wonderful World of Disney and stuff. So it was a big night where families were home. And it was successful for years, but it was like, we don't even need to write stories for this anymore. Like, we're going to repeat the same thing happens in every episode. The sea view winds up on the bottom, crashes on the bottom. There's a whole drinking game for that. Because they have the same footage of the sea view crashing into the ocean floor that's in almost every episode after like by the 3rd season.
There's a note in one of the contracts. You have a photo in the book where it says, "Please skip." Richard Basehart, who was the Captain Kirk of the Admiral Nelson, he was the Captain Kirk of the Seaview. Is not to be doesn't want to work after the morning.
right. Yeah.
Was that because after lunch he wasn't that dependable?
Yeah. That's pretty. Yeah. There are episodes too where he just disappears and they bring another admiral in. It's like he's off, and they even like had a double where you just see the back of him. And they had him come in and dub his lines in. So it gets pretty sad.
Yeah. But David Hedison, who was the Fly in the original The Fly, he seemed to be a trooper.
Yeah, he was. And he had a great friendship with he kind of, I think, helped Basehart get through the show because they wound up having a great friendship. And I think Hedison kind of talked Basehart off the ledge a bunch because he thought it was also ridiculous Felix Leiter.
Too. Yeah, he's Felix Leiter and living like
gets eaten by a shark. Appropriate for
exactly. That's very true.
But it becomes torturous. It particularly when you try to watch it as an adult. I love the look, the whole production era there.
I do too.
Almost go back and look at any 60s production and just like love the color and the design of everything.
You put them on without volume and they're just, Batman, Voyage of the Bottom of the Sea, all of those things, they're just gorgeous. And because they wanted to sell color televisions. So they're making it as bright and crisp. And then you get into the 70s and you get into like Bob Newhart's show and everything is just brown and avocado green.
Yeah, they didn't care at that point.
Everybody had a color TV so you could go back to reality. But Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and Star Trek too. They're just, and Batman, they're just so beautifully colorful and gorgeous to look at.
They are very filmic. And that was kind of Irwin's stock and trade at Fox, he made these TV shows that looked like movies. They had movie level visual effects. And so, they were still kind of battling the we're trying to get people to not go to the movies.
Trying to keep people at home.
Yeah, you're giving them something like the equivalent of movies on television, but he was sort of able to do it on a budget. And these shows all would start off with these spectacular pilots. Lost in Space is the same thing. He had all these amazing vehicles and sets built for it. It spends the first few episodes in outer space. You see these like alien derelict spacecraft, and then this fantastic crash on a planet. Then you have giant cyclopses and all this action that were from the pilot that he shot. That he spent a huge amount of money on. And he gets about 4 or 5 episodes out of that. So you're thinking, this is the most spectacular thing I've ever seen. And then by the 6th episode, it's like, well, we got a space cowboy. And then after that, it's just like, it's the space hillbilly, space pirate.
Yeah, we gotta, so where does, because Lost in Space is more known than Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, I think. But it came after Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Yeah. It's the year after, and I think the reason it's more known is because of what happens to the show. It becomes formula, but they have Jonathan Harris playing this Dr. Smith character. They have this great child actor Bill Mumy playing Will Robinson, and they have this robot who starts off in the pilot as this scary, slow, menacing thing, and then within a few episodes
becomes Geraldine.
Jonathan Harris had figured out that the way he was afraid that his character was going to get killed off because he's very menacing, and in fact, even throughout the first half of the season, he's constantly putting the Robinson family on the verge of being killed.
Yeah,
it's very clear that it's his fault.
Yes, and the premise of the premise of the show was very simple. It was the Swiss Family Robinson in outer space.
Right. With an asshole.
Right. Space Family Rob. The original title was Space Family Robinson.
Right. Yeah. In fact, they had tried to do, and Allen wound up doing a straight Swiss Family Robinson later. But this was an idea that I think the networks had actually developed the concept that they wanted to do like a futuristic version of Swiss Family Robinson, and there was a comic book about like a space family Robinson, and
you know the famous story of when Gene Roddenberry pitched Star Trek to CBS,
right? And they were like, "No thanks, we already have."
Well, no, it was worse. They had him come back in, and they had like every executive at this big table as well. How would you do that? How would you figure that? And it was just they weren't going to make Star Trek, but they wanted him to help them make Lost in Space.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so shitty.
Yeah. It started off as an ambitious idea, and then but the reason it's remembered today is because it became extremely character based, and those 3 characters sort of inadvertently became iconic.
Yes,
the Dr. Smith became one of the great aggravating kind of comic villains.
The Josh Hawley
of television. I remember talking to other kids when I was a kid, and kids just wanted to kill Dr. Smith. Like,
yeah,
he effed over the Robinsons again this week. It's like, we just got to kill. And then they had, this Don West character on the show was the only non-family member.
Yeah.
Who's kind of trapped with this family, and he's kind of, it's great because he's kind of in this constant low boil simmering state of homicidal rage.
Major West wanted to kill Dr. Smith, and from what I understand, the actor wanted to kill the character.
Yeah,
so he hated what the show did. He hated what the show became.
All the actors, apart from Bill Mumy and the guy that played the robot, Bob May, wound up kind of hating Jonathan Harris because he completely took over the show and sidelined them. Yeah. So they had nothing to do, and almost all the shows are just about the dynamics between this robot, little kid, and this wacky
Yeah, but it's an interesting story because it happens more often than you would realize. You think the show is something, and then you start working on it, and the show says, "No, I'm not that. I'm this," and characters come to the fore. I mean, I'm not making a comparison to the shows, but on Parks and Rec became some, and I worked on it. It became a different show than the original intention was.
Right.
It became about the characters and not about this concept of people in small government. It really that almost became irrelevant.
Yeah.
It was just a workplace drama, a workplace comedy with these characters.
Yeah, I think that Lost in Space it would probably be remembered like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is, as like a show with a bunch of special effects and monsters. But with those three characters, then you had all these catchphrases and things that jump out and people still remember today. And I think that's why it could be remade, whereas nobody's figured out a way to do Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea again because it's not about any characters. It's just about a submarine.
Very true. Very true.
So yeah, Lost in Space really became iconic. Allen's favorite show that he did was the Time Tunnel, and it was his least successful. It only lasted a year, and it was also another package of stock footage. He sold it as like, we can use all your historical footage and costumes and all this props and stuff that we have at the studio, and they saved money doing that. And it was his best reviewed show for the first few episodes. And then it just immediately kind of tanked in the ratings because it also got very formulaic.
And you can only go to so many places. This year we're going to 1883.
Yeah, it's also I said my log line for the Time Tunnel was like two American scientists get in fist fights with famous characters from history. It's literally they just drop in and are immediately in a fist fight.
Mary Todd Lincoln in a headlock.
Yeah, then it's just sort of some dialogue until the climactic fist fight.
And these are all on 1966, 1967, 1968.
Yeah. And he was developing his last big TV show, Land of the Giants, at the same time. It would have actually come on with those shows, but it somehow kind of got delayed in production, and it wound up coming out, I think it's 69 after, or it basically replaced Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea on Sunday nights.
68 or 69.
And what's interesting about Land of the Giants is the premise is pretty ridiculous, and it's a bit about it's basically Gilligan's Island, except they land on a planet full of giant people.
Right.
But
it's actually not a planet of giant people. They're just small.
Right.
The people are normal.
So it's all of them just running into giants episode after episode, which was a pretty limited idea. They wound up coming up with some kind of it actually lasted 2 seasons, and the second season they tried to make it about a totalitarian society, which apparently made it a big hit in like Poland. But it's what's interesting about it from a production standpoint is that it's kind of where Allen starts getting his ideas that would become disaster movies into the mix. Because it's this glamorous group of castaways who are like passengers on a futuristic airliner. So there's like a rich heiress, and
interesting.
There's
right.
There's a kind of a Dr. Smith like blustery character who's disguised. He's got a secret. He's disguised as a military man. There's a young kid for pathos. There's 2 handsome lead guys. There's a black actor who's not O.J. Simpson yet.
Right.
So it's a mix of, people from kind of different social classes in these situations where they're constantly having to climb up ropes and get trapped in drains and stuff. So there's lots and lots of stunt action and things falling on people. So it was really starting to lay the groundwork for the disaster movies, and he was developing Poseidon Adventure right around the same time that he did Land of the Giants.
Yeah, and that's the interesting twist in the story that's so unexpected. So you have this guy who just, in terms of being a TV producer, just ropes at a grand slam. Like you've got 4 shows on the air at the same time, basically.
Yeah.
Hour-long shows, making a fortune. And these shows do, Star Trek as well, although he had nothing to do with it, but define their era. Like Lost in Space and Star Trek have nothing in common except they're both.
But they're part of the big, and particularly after when you get into the 70s, they're the core of syndication, and so they're the shows that are on every day that kids come home from school, and you're going to wind up seeing Lost in Space and all these shows, and they are the shows that are being watched by young. They weren't kids; they're a little bit older, but like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. Yeah. They're in college or high school at this point. They're watching them. Their wheels are turning. That's interesting. And then so that's done. It's now 1970, 71, and he starts to make this movie that is also not only a massive hit. It starts an entire trend and genre of movies. It's like it's rare that you can make lightning strike back to back like that. Yeah, the Poseidon Adventure was a huge gamble for him. It took him forever to convince Fox to do it. He really wanted to direct it, and he had directed all the pilots for his shows. He was, masterful producer, and the studio loved his work as a producer, but nobody wanted to give him the reins of a big budget, dramatic movie.
They just didn't think he had the visual scope.
Yeah, I think they felt that he did have the visual scope, but that he couldn't direct actors and a story. So they got the guy who directed
John Gilliam?
No, that's Towering Inferno.
Okay.
The guy directed Prime of Miss Jean Brodie.
I can see the connection.
Great, but it's a great British drama with fantastic actor, and Maggie Smith got I think won an Academy Award for it. So Allen then,
who can direct a movie about a boat tipping over? I don't know who's worked with Maggie Smith.
Yeah. It's basically directed by this British filmmaker, but Allen was very, very involved in the action sequences. And if you watch the making of kind of video that was made at the time, you see him directing, the sequences.
And I will link to that for the Patreon page. I'll link to
Yeah.
You can also see his terrible style sense.
Yeah. It's probably got the most kind of like sex appeal of any, which is something that Allen was not known for. But in this movie, it's got like Stella Stevens and a couple.
It has
Carol Lindley, and they basically have to have their pants removed, so they can climb around the wreckage of it. So you see lots of legs in this movie,
it has. The Poseidon Adventure has everything it is. Like Gene Hackman, who is just breaking off the French Connection.
Right.
So it's a big starring role for Gene Hackman. Shelley Winters, who's ubiquitous and famous. Roddy McDowell, who was at Fox doing the Apes movies, and they needed to keep him working. All right, you can be in this too. Red Buttons, who was in The Greatest Show on Earth, who was Irwin Allen's pal. And and then they have the kid. I think it's Chris Makepeace is the kid. I'm not sure who it is.
Yeah.
Who is I was like, you hear the Will Robinson, you can be in this too. It's great. It has everything.
And Ernest Borgnine. Don't forget Ernest. Yeah.
You need some sex.
Yeah. So. Yeah. There's a.
What are you doing, preacher?
There's a great conflict between Ernest Borgnine and Gene Hackman, and two great actors, and they have huge fiery confrontations through the whole thing. So the Poseidon Adventure, I think, really works on a character. It's ridiculous, but it really does actually get you involved with the characters. And Shelley Winters kind of is like this kind of ridiculous overweight, Jewish woman, but she winds up breaking your heart because she's
Jack Albertson is in it.
Yeah. You see, Gene Hackman get to weep over her dead body after she's had a heart attack. And it had this iconic visual effects sequence of the tidal wave overturning this ocean liner, which
and the captain of the ship is Leslie Nielsen before he was a comedian.
Yeah. Then it's great to see
God.
how he got used in that, because it so wonderfully lays the groundwork for how he was going to be able to turn all that upside down later in his career. So
the whole premise of the movie, which is so great, is they're trying to get out of this boat that's been capsized. So it goes, well, if we need to go up, so we have to go down because the boat's upside down. We have to go up
to the bottom.
Right. And nobody can understand that.
Yeah.
It's simple. The roof is the ceiling now. It's not hard.
They did. I think for the screenwriters, they actually created a whole diagram of the upside down boat, so they could, because it was confusing for them too.
Yeah, I just remember the scene
keep track of where they're going.
Yeah, where Chris Makepeace and Carol Lindley go into the men's room and the urinals are on the ceiling.
There's all sorts of great. This was a perfect playground movie. For kids to probably weren't really supposed to see it, but still managed to get in and see it, and had all sorts of burn victims and the guy falling into the light on the ceiling.
Yeah, huge. Iconic
there's a lot
scene.
of really iconic visual effects and stunt effects shots. And this movie
had a hit song.
Yeah, and a hit song. It was a gigantic hit. It was a Star Wars sized blockbuster. It was one of the biggest movie hits in history up to that time. And so that's what you alluded to this. But I said in the book that Irwin Allen basically becomes the Steven Spielberg of the early 70s. Well, Spielberg is still on television making Duel, and he's
directing Columbo.
He's on the cusp of changing everything. But Allen is this creature of the studios and the studio system. He's worked, within that his whole career. He's become an absolute expert at production and creating these kind of larger than life scenarios and situations and sets, stunts, and special effects. He was doing, these cutting edge special effects movies before Jaws and before Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so he was really kind of priming the pump for everybody to go to these giant blockbuster movies. But he's arguably the most successful filmmaker working in between 1972 and 1974.
Well, after the Poseidon adventure, disaster films became.
Yeah, he completely creates the thing is
Airport
is the first sort of disaster movie of that era,
which is
68
Airport,
if you
or
watch
69.
Airport, it's not really a disaster movie. There's a little disaster that kind of happens that occupies about 5 or 10 minutes of it towards the when the bomb actually goes off inside the plane. But it's mostly just problems at the airport.
It's problems at the airport and a soap opera on a plane in trouble. And talk things that are of their time that are no longer. You could do.
You can't really get through Airport.
Yeah, Dean Martin's the co-pilot.
Yeah,
and his wife
was trying to talk the girlfriend into having an abortion.
Right out of the gate. First of all, his wife drives him to the airport. Barbara Hale from Perry Mason. And he goes, "What do you want me to bring you back from Italy, honey?" "Oh, just okay, I love you, baby." Gives her a kiss, walks in, sees his girlfriend. "Hey, sweetheart, how you doing?"
Yeah.
Without blinking, she's like, "I'm pregnant." Without blinking. "We're going to get you the best doctor. You're not going to go to some butcher above a drugstore. Anyway, I got to go."
How could you not love these characters?
Yeah, but it's also done he never has any comeuppance about feeling guilty about his wife.
These things happen. These things happen.
But because then Airport 75. So after the Poseidon adventure, then he makes. Now the disaster craze has started.
Yeah,
and he makes the towering Inferno, and some other studio makes Earthquake.
Right.
And then another movie starts to make Airport 75. And like now every movie, every studio has a giant disaster movie.
Yeah, and he creates the template because the you know, like
All-star,
I say, airport,
packed.
the disaster is sort of a subplot, but you know, Poseidon Adventure, it not only, you know, the movie is about the disaster, but it's also completely immersive. Like it actually traps the audience inside this, you know, kind of space with these characters.
Yeah.
And that became, I think, a big part of the more successful. That's one reason, like, to me, like, Earthquake sort of doesn't work that well as a disaster movie because you're kind of wandering all over Los Angeles and you're not trapped anywhere.
Right.
So Towering Inferno, he also, with Towering Inferno and Poseidon Adventure, I think almost accidentally, he stumbles on, like, primal fears that people have, you know, fear of drowning, claustrophobia, acrophobia, fear of, you know, fire.
Yeah.
So it's something that's very
Fear
visceral.
Of heights. Yeah, the Towering Inferno.
When I have a huge acrophobia.
Fear of O.J. Simpson.
Exactly. I have terrible acrophobia, and Towering Inferno was my first date movie. And I just remember it being just a mind-blowing, I mean, you know, I was like white knuckle every time they, you know, go outside the building and you see how high you are. And then it's like, wait, you know, we can't go the only way to escape is to fall. It really is vivid. I mean, it is not, and it's, Towering Inferno is a 3-hour movie. It's like, by this point, it's like, give Irwin Allen anything he wants. Yeah. And you know, they had, Warner Brothers had their own, you know, burning building movie that they had developed.
Two books came out at the same time.
The same time. They'd each been bought by, you know, one by Fox and one by Warner Brothers. And Allen was absolutely a genius at seeing a way to head off the problem of having dueling movies and to make this deal, to make it a co-production. And theoretically, then you would have more money and resources to make this a super spectacle. You would get publicity just by the fact of saying it took 2 studios to make this movie. And that's then amazing. This also, you know, again, neither studio trusts them, particularly Fox, which was the main, you know, company still kind of making the movie. Right. They still didn't trust them to direct it. So, you know, they got John Guillermin to direct it. And it gets this even bigger all-star cast, you know, Steve McQueen and Paul Newman and Faye Dunaway, everybody who was huge. And it's this very sprawling movie. And it's an even bigger hit than Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah. In 1974, that was the movie.
Yeah. It was, and it was. I remember, you know, you remember when movies are held over. It's held over. I think it was held over for 8 weeks in my little podunk, you know, hometown.
And where was that?
It's Defiance, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
This was
Defiance, Ohio.
Yes. A friend of mine calls it Intolerance, Ohio.
Yeah, the Towering Inferno is and Earthquake came out the same year, I believe, 1974. Yeah. It is the biggest movie of the year. And nobody thought you could have a movie bigger than the Towering Inferno. And then the next year, Jaws.
Yeah. It's funny, while, you know, the crew was actually hearing stories about Jaws while they're making, you know, Towering Inferno, and it's kind of a big joke because of all the stuff that was going wrong. And in fact, you know, I remember reading about Jaws at the time, and it's coming out of the cycle of disaster movies, and it was everyone sort of treated it as the next disaster movie.
Right. And at the time,
Charlton Heston wanted to play Brody, and there was. That's sort of how it was seen. Nobody realized that this was going to completely change everything about this kind of movie. And the big movie at Universal when they were making Jaws was the Hindenburg, right? Which was another disaster movie. Yeah. And they thought, and they're like, I don't know, some kid that used to direct Columbo was doing some shark movie. It's way over, but it's screwed. They're a month over schedule. They're dead. And then the Hindenburg went.
The Hindenburg crash.
The whole disaster movie cycle basically crashes after Towering Inferno, and because of the whole co-production aspect of Towering Inferno, Allen had gotten in with these executives at Warner Brothers, and of course they see him as Steven Spielberg. It's like, this is the greatest, producer. We should give this guy everything he wants. We should get him away from Fox. This guy should be ours. So they basically, tell him we're going to give you your own building, name a building after you. We're going to give you the greatest development deal in the history of movies. And so they got him right as he was finished. He's at the absolute apex of his career. He makes the deal, and he's all excited because it's like, now I can become a director. Right. Now I'm going to be able to do what I've really always wanted. And he had all these things in the pipeline. He was going to do some kind of he's basically going to do another, Krakatoa east of Java, with this kind of period volcano movie, and this thing called Circus, like this sprawling 3D circus movie about a big heist. And he's working on these television shows, and he's kind of scrambling to make what's his next big movie going to be. He sort of accidentally winds up directing this movie about Evel Knievel, because
is that the one with George Hamilton?
No, it's with
Evel Knievel. Then it's Viva Knievel.
Viva Knievel. And this director Gordon Douglas had been on it and basically got sick.
Sick of dealing with Evel Knievel.
Yeah, the first few days of filming, and Allen took it over. Yeah. Evel Knievel was the surly alcoholic. Yeah. And there's a documentary
about him, and the basic story, what's the story tell him? That he was an asshole.
Yeah. He is a very unpleasant guy with zero charisma, as an actor. And then what's great about the movie is that Gene Kelly, this great Hollywood star, is supposed to be playing a broken down alcoholic in the movie, and he looks 1,000 times more fit and vibrant than that. Knievel is all red faced and just looks just sad and angry the whole time. So
amazing,
and it's a movie that instantly disappeared. So then his next thing that he's got in development is The Swarm, which is a movie about killer bees, and which he tries to make into this sprawling production. It winds up being I think at least a 2.5 hour movie. It gets another big all-star cast with Michael Caine and all these people. And it at its core, I remember Gene Siskel, they were reviewing some movie, I think Nightwing, about killer bats.
Killer bats.
And he's he's comparing it to Jaws. It's Jaws, there's this terrifying giant thing coming at you. It's these movies like The Swarm and this one, it's just something where you just want to brush it off. It's ew, your reaction is more it's an annoyance. There's not a, I'm sure people are afraid of bees, but it's not an existential.
Yeah, it's not. It
fear.
doesn't. People aren't afraid of bees. You always think that you can. And the other thing, but here's the killer. While they're filming The Swarm, Star Wars opens.
Right.
And turns the movie industry inside out, upside down, and backwards.
It's already basically. First of all, there'd already been there. They got beaten to television by at least 3 TV movies about killer bees.
About killer bees. One of them called The Killer Bees.
Yes, and it all already was lumped in with a bunch of these attempts to capitalize on Jaws, like Grizzly, and it's just movies about various animals going berserk and attacking people, none of which even ever got off the ground, really, in comparison to what Jaws had become. So even in terms of just as a reaction to Jaws, which it wasn't, it was something that Allen had in development for a while, but even on that level, it was a miserable failure. And the book, The Swarm was actually kind of like the Andromeda Strain, is filled with like schematics of, chemical formulas and it was very, very, science-based.
Yeah.
And it was sort of absorbing on that level.
Or the
But
lesser-known predecessor of the Andromeda Strain, and is actually a much more exciting movie, Bug.
Bug, right? Yeah. He didn't get what the book was about, and basically just turned it into the same kind of soap opera, and it becomes like Airport in that it's just a bunch of big glamorous stars in various locations. They're never confined to any space. You get to, they're flying around in helicopters and driving, and so you never get the sense that they're really in danger by anything, and that the special effects are nothing to write home about.
Right.
So it's a giant fiasco, and it's his first big directing screen, directing credit, and it just instantly shows that he's completely at sea in terms of directing actors or editing, getting a movie to a reasonable length.
Yeah.
Everything about it is basically terrible. I got some of the worst reviews. I mean, people it became an instant joke. And it's
amazing that right at the peak of his career and power and influence, the culture passed him by, and he made his first major misstep.
Yeah.
It's like it was a completely it's classic. It's classic.
Classic hubris.
Yeah.
He got everything he wanted, and he just never he had no sense of his own weaknesses.
Yeah.
And
it's understandable when you're that, when they say, "Hey, we named a building after you."
Yeah.
You must think, maybe.
And he had a sizable ego, even when he was doing, his TV shows at Fox. He was very much, used, I think, kind of Cecil B. DeMille as the model for what he wanted to be as a director or producer, a big impresario, and a huge kind of showbiz icon. And obviously he had a guy, I talked to Bill Creeber, who was a production designer, a fantastic production designer, and Creeber was one of the few guys who could tell him he was wrong. And eventually he got sick of it after Towering Inferno. It's weird that he bailed right after Towering Inferno, because it's almost like he knew, and it might have been, in fact, that he knew that they were going to let Irwin start directing. But Creeber was, the only guy who was sort of on Irwin's level, who could say, no, you don't want to do it this way. So after that, it's really, everybody's just going to let him have what he wants.
Right. Yeah. And Bill Creeber, very much a genius.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, he's the guy who, he's one of the first people on, Planet of the Apes, who, John Chambers was this very irascible makeup artist. He's one of the first people that Chambers thought was smart at Fox. He's like, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about.
Right.
So, yeah, Allen, he needed that, and he had kind of a big family of people who stuck with him, but he didn't have someone who was going to tell him no. So it's one of the biggest falls. It's literally as it had. This happened to Spielberg too, in a way, because of 1941.
Yeah,
right. He does Close Encounters and Jaws, and is at the absolute apex of American film, and then does one bomb, but then he figures out what he did wrong, instantly recovers and makes Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And
instantly recovers. Yeah.
Allen was not able to recover, and his further, projects just became more and more diminished. He does a sequel to Poseidon Adventure that looks like it cost about $5.
Right.
And then he did this, this period volcano movie that he was gonna do eventually kind of evolves into like a contemporary volcano movie set in Hawaii, and he goes and shoots that with, as big a cast of stars as he had on any of his other movies. But between the star salaries and like shooting on location, it becomes the most expensive thing that he ever made, and it's barely released. It's a movie I didn't even know about.
Me neither. What's it called?
It's called When Time Ran Out.
I knew the title. I didn't know that's what it was about.
And even the Red Buttons talking about it's like they got Empire Strikes Back is out, and he's making this movie about like people trying to get across to like a rope bridge on Hawaii, and that was it for him. He was
there it is.
They would not. That was the end of his contract at Warner's. He was not able to make any more features. He kind of went back to television. The thing that I find really amazing is he wound up, his last thing that he did, he of course made like sort of like made for TV disaster movies. He made one called Flood and Fire, and I was waiting for the next one to be Famine.
Locusts. Day of the Locusts.
He was kind of doing like low budget versions of what he'd been doing in theaters. And then his last thing, he was making kind of like these almost like variety show kids movies like Alice in Wonderland, which winds up getting like 5 Emmy nominations. It was actually like a big success. But it's like a Carol Burnett show, sketch.
Right.
But he had the rights and was in development to do like Marvel superhero shows. And he had the rights to do Daredevil.
There's no
and Black
future
Widow.
there.
They were all in development, and it's a weird story because you know how the Incredible Hulk, like they wound up doing those TV movies where they had like Daredevil and Thor. I've never been able, these were done around the same time, and I've never been able to, in all the paperwork that I went through, there's no like paper trail connecting those, but it can't be a coincidence that they happen around the same time, but they never were done by Irwin Allen and his studio. But I can only imagine what, Irwin Allen's Marvel superheroes would have been like. It would have been absolutely fascinating, but it probably would have buried. We probably never would have gotten the MCU because there would have been a stench lasting for decades. Yeah. No, but you can't put Marvel superheroes in it. This will never work. We've seen it fail before.
It's amazing. Yeah, we all remember the Spider-Man TV show with
Nicholas Hammond.
Who I believe is in Once Upon a Time in America.
Yeah, he is, and he's great in it. I was like watching that. Who is that? That guy's great. Oh my God, it's Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's great in it. In it.
Yeah.
My house is also in it.
Really? That's cool.
My house is in it.
Oh my God.
The exterior. But there's a great showbiz, analogy, and it's just like, this isn't beware or this will happen to you. This will happen to you. This is how it works. Bill Mooney says, like, at Warner Brothers, he went to visit him. The first time he went to visit him, he was in a building that was named after him. He had the Irwin Allen building, and his name was on a brass plate at the front of the building. And the last time we went to see him, he was in a trailer by the exit.
Yeah, it's brutal. And it particularly because he wasn't just like a producer and a filmmaker, he made himself like a mogul and
he was Walt Disney,
a brand.
Yeah, a brand.
And I remember vividly, in fact, when I was a kid, whenever I saw the name Irwin Allen, I would get this jolt of adrenaline, like, oh, this is going to be, whatever this is going to be exciting. And then, with the disaster movies, he very much made it all the publicity was all about him.
Yeah.
If you
I never thought about that. You're right.
If you watch the making of for Poseidon Adventure, and particularly for Towering Inferno, it's completely focused on him. Like, you would almost never know that there was an actual guy, not him, directing that movie.
Yeah, you can't. There's no. You look like in all of the footage of the Poseidon Adventure, he's got the bullhorn.
Yeah, he's the guy with the bullhorn. And yeah, he just made himself this huge thing. And so it's funny because I think in a weird way, it was a blessing because Jaws and Star Wars were eating up so much oxygen that there wasn't a big, like, the fall of Irwin Allen, that now I think that
it's kind of also
that would really be a blow by blow, story about that was, playing out in front of you. And it's something we sort of, came to way after the fact that you realize what happened. But it's one of the biggest falls of any kind of Hollywood presence that I can think of.
Yeah. When did he pass and how? Was he still working or did he retire at some point?
He was still kind of operating. This guy, Joe Musso, he started working with him on Towering Inferno and then worked on all the projects with him and literally had almost like a deathbed story where Irwin he'd had heart surgery and some major heart problems and was recovering from that and was, like in bed, still signing, insisting that he was going to sign autographs for his fans and stuff. And then
it was Hitchcock literally planning out.
Yeah. He was going to do another, I think he was going to do Pinocchio because Alice in Wonderland had been a big success on TV and he was going to do another show like that.
I think Ernest Lehman and Hitchcock were blocking out a movie when he passed. Yeah.
So this was, I think,
he just said, "Forget it, I can't do this."
I think at 89 or 90 is when he dies, and he really has almost nothing, other than a couple. He was doing little minor TV projects through the 80s, but most of the last few years, I think, was just kind of planning.
Wow.
And
amazing.
I think Kevin Burns told me some story about Jonathan Harris going to meet him and just seeing how emaciated he was, that he had just physically had kind of shrunk from this larger than life person to someone who was old and feeble,
right?
But who still had a little and Harris was one of the few other people who could kind of puncture his ego and needle him. And I think even at this kind of last meeting, Allen had said something presumptuous about, because he was trying to get another Lost in Space revival going. And I think Harris kind of turned him down and, it was something
he had to do Far Out Space Nuts.
Exactly. But yeah, it's
Starfleet. He was on some side of the morning show.
Oh yeah, Jason of Star
Command. Yeah.
He was very, very diminished, from this larger than life person that he'd kind of always been.
It's how it happens. It happens to everybody.
Yep.
It happens to everybody. It is amazing. It's amazing. These people
I wish,
were so huge, and you end up in a room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's great that you're doing this. I mean, I think that you can still buy this book for like $300 on eBay.
It's an amazing book.
We should have charged $200 or $300 for it originally. I think we sold it for $80. And it's literally a $200 book. It's such a giant.
I'll have a little mini video about it on Patreon.
So we can sell the last 10. 10
go over to Taylor's place.
They're still out there. I shipped a couple to like South America in the past few months.
Between your Irwin Allen book and Taylor's Night Gallery book, it's like you're gonna sink. The building is gonna sink into the concrete with the weight of these.
It costs, with that was another problem with the Irwin Allen book, is it cost so much to ship, and it wasn't sold anywhere overseas. It's a Taschen book. It's just not a Taschen. It's totally a Taschen book. I don't know if we ever approached Taschen. I approached this company Titan that did the Star Trek the Motion Picture book. And they agreed to do it, but they wanted to clear all the photos, of right. Paul Newman and everything. And Kevin Burns was like, forget it. He's like, I own this stuff. And he was right because we never would have cleared all that stuff.
Yeah, you would have never done it.
Yeah, and it's got great celebrity photos. And
it's this book is just you pick it up and you're in, and you just it's on my coffee table. And you just start glancing at it, like
it really needs a lectern.
It really does, but it's
I don't know. It's like I tried reading it in bed, and it's impossible. It actually starts breaking your thighs.
Yeah, but it's a really beautiful book, and it's a great story. This is what I'm gonna we'll close this off with a quote from his wife, which was, "He loved his life. And what more can you say about somebody than they got to do exactly what they love to do? He loved being Irwin Allen."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Could do a lot worse.
Again, I appreciate, I've talked to so many people who've liked this book, but you're probably the first person I've talked to who sounds like he actually read it. Because I think it does, I think, have a great story. And we didn't know that going in. But it is a fantastic rise and fall in Hollywood story. And so I hope this will, if it doesn't encourage people to buy the book, I hope it encourages the people who own it and looked at the pictures to actually read it.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
Bob Rafelson was born in New York City in 1933. He was a well-heeled young man. He attended Horace Mann and later Dartmouth, where he became pals with the young screenwriter Buck Henry. Of course, this was before he was a screenwriter, but he was still Buck Henry. Rafelson was an adventurous sort. After college, he was drafted into the Army and stationed in Japan, where he worked as a DJ and became exposed to the work of great Japanese film directors like Yasujiro Ozu, who would later become a major creative influence. Now, he gets out of the Army, and by 1962, Bob Rafelson is married. A young married dude with a young son and a daughter on the way, and he is determined to be successful in showbiz. He moved his family out to Hollywood, where he became a producer with the television arm of Universal Studios. But he was not a man to be trifled with. Peter Biskind, in his excellent book, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, tells a story of a young Bob Rafelson in a meeting with Lew Wasserman, the undisputed ruler of Universal Studios. Now, to put the power dynamic into context, this is a meeting of a stormtrooper with Darth Vader. And Darth Wasserman was berating Rafelson for hiring an actor on a Universal TV show who had pimples on the back of his neck. You heard that correctly. This was the cause for a meeting. Anyway, Rafelson took umbrage and, using his forearm, swept the contents of Lew Wasserman's desktop onto Lew Wasserman's floor. Lew Wasserman personally escorted Bob off the lot that day. Eventually, Rafelson would team up with a kindred spirit named Bert Schneider, and they would form Raybert Productions. Get it? Now, Rafelson had an idea for a TV show based on a period in his life when he was living in Mexico and in a band. But it was also a time when he was much more interested in goofing off and having fun than in being a professional musician. He thought that 4 young guys in a band, more interested in having fun than making a living, was a great idea for a TV show. He thought that, and nobody else did. And then something happened.
It's been a hard day's night.
Yep,
And I've been working
the Beatles
like
happened.
a dog.
Specifically, the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night happened. And suddenly, Bob Rafelson's idea did not seem so wacky. At first, the plan was to get an actual band, and many were scouted. And one band specifically looked like the perfect fit. It was a folk rock group from New York called the Lovin' Spoonful. Yeah, those guys. And they probably would have worked. Those guys are great. Unfortunately, the Lovin' Spoonful had just been signed to Elektra Records. And so, an ad was placed in the Hollywood trade papers and open auditions were held. The ad read as follows: Madness, folk and role musicians. Singers for acting roles in new TV series, running parts for 4 insane boys ages 17 to 21. Want spirited Ben Franks types. Have courage to work. Must come down for an interview. Call Hollywood 06-5188. That was the old phone exchange, HO 06-5188. As for Ben Franks types, Ben Franks was a hipster coffee shop in the heart of the Sunset Strip, which was a hot hangout for hipsters and Hollywood rock and roll types. Rumor is the Buffalo Springfield was formed in the Ben Franks parking lot. Now, Ben Franks closed in 1996, but the building, with its iconic mid-century Googie's architecture, is still there in the heart of the Strip, and it is now Mel's Drive-In, if and you ever want to go. Anyway, the 4 insane boys were cast to star in a show called The Monkees. The Monkees starred Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Peter Tork, and Mike Nesmith as the Monkees. But they weren't playing the Monkees. They were the Monkees, on the Monkees. And if you think that's confusing, check this out. 2 of the Monkees, Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones, were professional actors playing musicians. The other 2, Mike Nesmith and Peter Tork, were professional musicians pretending to be actors. The Monkees premiered on NBC in September of 1966, and it was an instant, huge hit. In addition to being a hit show, the Monkees released an album called The Monkees. This was released in October, 1 month after the show premiered. But there was a problem. The album made it look like the Monkees were really a band. They're even credited with playing their own instruments on the record sleeve. But that was not the case. The songs were written by big-time professional songwriters like Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart, or Jerry Goffin and Carole King. Mike Nesmith, true to be told, does have a credit or 2 on the first album. The instruments were played by session musicians, mostly the famous Wrecking Crew, but the record sleeve implied that it was all the work of the Monkees. You know who didn't like that? The Monkees. Mickey Dolenz specifically went to the producers complaining, "Look, you've gone too far here. You're lying to the public. We're playing a band and you're here saying we are one. It's dishonest." For his efforts, the producers patted him on the head and probably said something like, Sure, kid. Don't worry about it. Nobody cares." And, for the record, they were both right. It was dishonest and nobody cared. But the issue would not go away. Their first album, called The Monkees, by The Monkees, from the hit show The Monkees, was released a month after the show premiered and spent 3 months at number 1. Over the course of their recording career, the Monkees had a string of hits. Last Train to Clarksville, I'm a Believer, Valerie, I'm Not Your Steppin' Stone, Pleasant Valley Sunday, and on and on and on. The Monkees were beloved by young teenagers and their parents, to whom they presented a safer, cuddlier alternative to those strange and terrifying hippies. At the end of its first season, the Monkees won the Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series. After the success of the first season, the band went on tour. But wait, I thought they weren't really a band. Exactly. The guys playing the Monkees on the show The Monkees, who resented being presented as a real band on The Monkees or on the album The Monkees, slowly, to meet the demands of their success, became a real band. As Mickey Dolenz said, it was like Leonard Nimoy having to turn into a real Vulcan. But still, they had issues in the recording studio. They were not being allowed to write their songs or play their instruments. Their second album, More of the Monkees, was released during the show's hiatus when the band was on tour, and that was the last straw. And the band began a concerted effort to gain authorship and control over their recording career. And to their great credit, they succeeded. But that didn't matter to the showbiz hipsters, the movers, the shakers, and other various and sundry members of the counterculture intelligentsia. The prefab four had always been an object of derision. So the Monkees entered the national consciousness in 1966, when the Beatles were still mop tops and the 60s were still far out and groovy. But after the end of the Monkees' second season, as 1967 blossomed into 1968, the country's mood was turning dark and cynical. 1968 was a year of assassination, the Vietnam War, harder drugs, riots, protests, Richard Nixon, and still more assassination. By 1968, the Monkees' goofball antics seemed out of touch. As Terrell said to Roy Batty, the star that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And the series was canceled after its second season. Anyone who would assume that the Monkees were finished had yet to check with Bob Rafelson. The show's original creator had a bank shot planned. A movie based on a TV show that was inspired by a movie. Only this movie would turn both the TV show and the movie that inspired it inside out and upside down. It would be an anti-movie. Free from the grind of filming a weekly half-hour television show, Bob Rafelson wanted to make a movie. A movie that would help the Monkees deconstruct not only themselves, but the very business and the culture that created them. It was a tall order, but he had the perfect man for the job. An actor, known primarily, if at all, for his work in several low-budget Roger Corman horror movies like Little Shop of Horrors and The Terror. The Monkees movie would be written by Bob Rafelson's pal, Jack Nicholson. Yes, that Jack Nicholson, but before he was Jack Nicholson. Rafelson later said, "I felt there was a truth that hasn't been told, and that is the truth of the accusations about the Monkees not singing their own songs, not playing their own instruments, the so-called adult assault on their sensibility. So I thought I should make a movie about that. In other words, expose the Monkees and my relationship to the Monkees as truthfully as I possibly could, although in a very abstract manner. Very abstract." To get started, Bob, Jack, Mickey, Davey, Peter, and Mike retreated to Ojai, California, where, according to an article in The Guardian, they spent several days smoking massive amounts of marijuana and pouring ideas into a tape recorder. Nicholson then took the tapes and constructed the story of the film to feel like an LSD trip. The idea was to make a Monkees movie that used the Monkees to take apart the Monkees. An avant-garde film that satirized its own subject and the medium of film itself. Fun fact: the people most likely to see the film, the vast majority of Monkees fans, were 14-year-old girls. The film got off to a rocky start when Mike Nesmith, Mickey Dolenz, and Davy Jones didn't show up for work on the first day of filming. Now, there are conflicting reports as to whether the walkout was creative or financial, and it only lasted a day, but it was enough to damage the band's relationship with Rafelson. It was his first day directing his first film, and the cast didn't show. But eventually they showed up, and the cameras turned on the Monkees movie titled Head. Rumor has it, the reason they called it Head was because if they made a movie after Head, they could have advertised it as "From the producers that gave you Head." True story. Lest you think Rafelson and company were attempting to be subtle, one of the first songs in the movie is a parody of the Monkees' famous "Hey Hey We're the Monkees" TV theme. As you all know, the theme goes, "Hey hey we're the Monkees, and people say we monkey around, but we're too busy singing to put anybody down." See? Nice and safe and friendly. But the movie Head's theme song is called Ditty Diego, and it goes like this. "Hey hey we're the Monkees, you know we love to please, a manufactured image with no philosophies." The song ends with, "Hey hey we're the Monkees, we've said it all before, the money's in, we're made of tin, we're here to give you more." Not long after that, the film cuts to the notorious newsreel footage of a South Vietnamese general executing a North Vietnamese soldier in the street. Daydream believer, it's not. From there, Head moves into a non-linear series of Hollywood genre parodies, a western, a prize-fighting movie, a desert epic, all in one joyous, surrealistic pastiche. At one point, Mickey Dolenz breaks the fourth wall and walks out of a scene, tearing a hole through the backdrop painting. Breaking the third wall too, I guess. And in another, Peter Tork summons director Rafelson and writer Nicholson onto the set to complain about the scene we just watched. Sharp-eyed viewers can spot Dennis Hopper in his Easy Rider wardrobe hanging around on the set. Head was released on November 6th, 1968. It had a budget of about $750,000 and made on its first run about $16,000. Not ideal. The problem was, it was a movie made for an audience that had no intention of ever seeing it, while at the same time going out of its way to alienate the only audience that would. Although greatly disappointed by Head's cold reception, Bob Rafelson and Jack Nicholson would go straight into another collaboration, this time with Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda, on the film Easy Rider. That film would, in fact, turn Hollywood inside out and upside down, doing to the movie industry what the Beatles did to the record industry a couple of years previous. It would also, with one film, make Jack Nicholson a movie star. As for the Monkees, Peter Tork left the band not long after Head's release. Nesmith, Dolenz, and Jones continued for a short while before they too called it quits. After Easy Rider, Rafelson went on to direct the classic Five Easy Pieces and The King of Marvin Gardens, both with Nicholson. He also produced The Last Picture Show and the brilliant 1974 documentary on the American misconceptions of the Vietnam War, Hearts and Minds. Rafelson is widely considered one of the pillars of the Hollywood auteur movement of the early 1970s. He passed away just last month, July 23rd, 2022. As for Head, and the Monkees for that matter, time has been kind. The film is now considered to have been fantastically ahead of its time, a shining example of the oft-neglected American avant-garde. It is a punk movie, in spirit, if not in musical genre. Quentin Tarantino is a big admirer, and it has earned its own glossy release from Criterion. Of course, not everyone is a fan. Asked his opinion of the film, the Monkees' Davy Jones once said, "We should have made Ghostbusters."
Here we come, walking down the street. We get the funniest looks from everyone we meet. Hey, hey, we're the Monkees!
And now, on with the show.
My guest today wrote one of my new favorite books. He came referred by Drew Friedman, the estimable Drew Friedman, friend of the show. And this book is one of those things where I got it and I was like, oh my God, how did I not have this book? It's called PrimeTime 1966-1967 because we are in what many people say as peak television. You know, I was at the movies. I went to the movie theater with my child who wanted to see Thor, and it was quite enjoyable. I enjoyed Thor. I like mass entertainment. But you realize that if you want to see something that challenges you intellectually, you have to go to your television, by and large. That television and movies have sort of switched places. There's a great book about it called PrimeTime 66-67, written by Tom Shubilla.
This is the sound of my voice.
Now, I originally thought your name was Tom Shubilla.
It's a made-up last name. My grandfather had a grocery store and wanted to make a last name that was a little bit more easy to pronounce, and nobody could pronounce it correctly. So,
well, and the original last name was
Rejbilla.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So,
well, you know,
a little bit more ethnic. But.
Sure. You know the actress Chloe Sevigny?
Yes.
I know her brother, Pete Sevigny. So, you tell me. Now, so one about this book. How old were you in 1966?
I was negative 18.
Yeah, I was going to say you don't even look like you remember it. So what was it? What was it about this particular season that drew your interest?
So certainly it was something that's always kind of been in my my wheelhouse. I've always been really obsessed with that particular era, particularly 1966 around there.
As am I.
Yes, and actually that was really what got us together.
Right.
Was you mentioning it on Mark Maron that you really did enjoy that particular era of time.
The best description I heard of it was Elvis Costello was talking about pet sounds, and he said it was the 60s just before it got spooky.
But yeah, I to be honest, I did grow up watching these shows. These are shows that I grew up watching. Get Smart, Dragnet. Were two shows that were just a part of my childhood. Gilligan's Island, Petticoat Junction, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched. These were the shows that I typically watched on repeat and obviously continue to watch. So I started kicking around some ideas for a book. And I didn't know what it was at the time. Some project I started kicking around ideas for. And I wanted to write about Batman a little bit. And my first idea was Beatles, Bond, and Batman.
Right. The 60s, the three Bs of the 1960s. Beatles, Bond, and Batman.
Beatles, Bond, and Batman. I said, okay, it's the height of pop culture. Beatles, Bond, Batman.
Right.
With Batman, we have obviously the Batman TV show and
do you ever think that there'll be a movie about Batman that has a dark take on the character?
Impossible. Forget it. It's only going to be Adam West. It's the only Batman anybody will ever know.
There's certain things that you just, as you get older, you're like, this is a dark take on Batman, unlike every other film version of Batman. Or, well, this Bond girl, she's not like the other Bond girl. She's very independent. And yes, they
like
started
all the others.
Yeah. But that is what people call the pop culture 60s, the three Bs: Beatles, Bond, and Batman.
And I started kicking around that idea a little bit, but there was a blog, there was a couple things on it, and I said, okay. And I just started writing about Batman a little bit in television, and I came across that interesting fact that 1966-67, so starting in September 1966, every television show was in color. That's the first season that every single show was in color. There was no longer any black and white shows. Shows like The Munsters, Dick Van Dyke, Addams Family all went off the air.
Did they go off the air specifically because they weren't in color, or
no,
it was just a sort of an epoch
happened
ending.
to be that way,
right?
And every show switched over. So Wild Wild West, The Fugitive, I Dream of Jeannie, F Troop, Peyton Place, Lost in Space, Avengers in Combat, all switched over. So
Dark Shadows.
That was not a primetime show, and actually went to color the next season.
Okay.
That was the first season of Dark Shadows being a color show.
And the other thing that I would imagine is, so if the primetime schedule is all in color, major companies want to sell color televisions.
Yes, and that's one of the big driving forces of this. Actually, going into the 1966 television schedule, only about 9 to 10% of all Americans owned American households owned a color television. So this big switch to color was really catering to a very small minority of people that owned a color television that were fortunate enough. However, it went up about 9% every year subsequently, and the price dropped.
What you're really introducing also is a new major element of American home furniture.
Yeah.
Your home is going to have one of these.
Yeah. And I always think about, and I mentioned it in the book, when I talk about the invention of television and how we kind of got to that color. So it's colorization, commercialization, invention, things like that. And if you think back to, there's two examples that I have. The first one being the Three Stooges. If you remember the Three Stooges episode, A Plumbing Will Go. Okay.
Of course I do. Who do you think you're talking to?
Now, in that episode, they're in a mansion where they're going to watch television. They're going to watch Niagara Falls. And I remember thinking as a child going like, well, what's the big deal? Now looking at it, I'm going, oh, this was a big...
Right.
This was a big deal. They're going to watch Niagara Falls on the TV.
Because they've never seen it. Because they've never seen it. Yeah.
This is a big deal. And the other one is the.
Now, there's no way the water would come out of the television, though.
There's
That's
no
just
way.
insane.
They hired real plumbers. The second is the Bela Lugosi movie, Murder by Television, one of his Poverty Row films. And again, in that, there, it's a wealthy party going on, and the party's around television, and then somebody gets, as the title suggests, murdered by television.
Right.
So those are two examples of that where they said, yeah, television is going to be in your living room.
Right.
And those were two pop culture examples, as far back as the 30s.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole new element of American culture. And so when you get up to 66, I just thought of sports because I remembered the Happy Days episode where they're trying to watch a boxing match. And usually with new technology, like if you look at it's driven by sports and porn. And you couldn't do porn, so I'm assuming that they had to default to sports. And I also know that it seems to me that what is great about that era aesthetically is the colors. They're so bright and so beautiful and so crisp. Like if you watch any of those shows that you're describing that we watched as kids, Get Smart, I Dream of Jeannie, especially Star Trek and Bat-Man, like just this strong, beautiful, crisp, clean, vibrant primary colors. And then you get into this, you go 6 years forward, which you would think, well, it's the future, it's progressing. Everything is avocado green and mud brown.
Well, that's true. Yeah. That certainly was the style of the 70s too. Yeah. So,
but with those shows, like with I know this is true of Star Trek. With shows like Batman, when they told make them as colorful as you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. They needed to sell some TV sets with that one.
It's so funny.
Certainly with Star Trek became the face of RCA, and same thing with Bonanza.
Really? Oh, Bonanza too.
Yeah, Bonanza was one of the first. Bonanza was always in color, and so Bonanza started in '59. So that was one of the early leaders.
It was always in color, even then.
Always in color. Every episode of Bonanza is in color.
I had no idea. The other weird thing is that he was younger than some of his kids. In the book, you have them broken down into sitcoms, superhero shows, dramas.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, there were, like, if you compare it to culture today, like the movie industry today, the movie industry now is driven by superheroes.
Absolutely.
And television was too at that point.
Well,
and westerns, and it's all with the exception of sitcoms by and large, the big shows were all different versions of American mythology.
Very true. It's a good pointing that out. It's very true. Yeah, westerns seemingly at the time were on the decline a little bit, and kind of petering out a little bit. But the superhero show that season, the superheroes, that's when it really started to really take off. No pun intended on that. But yeah, there was Batman really kicked off that superhero craze that season.
And Batman was on. But it wasn't like the Superman show, which was 10 years earlier. These were all tongue in cheek. Like this is this is 60s pop culture, a lot of pop art. I believe there was a musical on Broadway about Superman right around this time.
Yes, that's the same time. There's a really great Life magazine article when Batman came out. I think it came out in March of '66.
Is that the one with Batman on the cover?
Yes,
I have that. I have that.
Yeah,
issue,
and if it talks about both of those things, it talks about the Batman TV show and the craze around it. And it also talks about the Superman play, Up, Up and Away, I think it's called. Is it because, and you would know this, is it because 1966, it's not what people think of as the 60s in terms of the counterculture. The counterculture hasn't really that has not
come to the fore yet.
No.
That's 68, 9, 70, 71, 72. That there's some elements of it coming in. Now, the one big thing that I didn't really realize this. So Dragnet, which had been off the air since I believe 1959, restarts mid-season January 1967. First episode kicks the door into color with the Blue Boy episode. Right. Kicks the app, so right there. I have a Blue Boy throw pillow. Okay, go ahead.
Well, there we go. I'm talking to the right guy.
Yeah, you are talking to the right guy.
Kicks the absolute door.
I also own Jack Webb's whiskey set.
I did know that. Yes, that I know.
You are talking to the right. I don't want to brag.
I'm talking to the right guy. So it's the first episode of the new series, and that absolutely kicks the door in.
Yeah, and that's the famous Blue Boy. Kids on LSD, kids taking acid, and because Dragnet in the 40s and in the 50s, I guess maybe the radio show started in the 40s.
Radio show was in the 40s.
Yeah, it was cops and robbers.
Mm-hmm. And it was a procedural.
Yeah, it was a procedural. And a brilliant procedural. Like those radio shows, and they're addictive. They, in terms of from a writing perspective, there's not a line of dialogue wasted. They move like goddamn freight trains. But in 1966, when it comes back, it's not cops and robbers. It's cops and hippies.
It's cops and hippies. I love the episode where he goes to college. And there's the girl that he's kind of flirting with, and a bag of grass falls on the ground, and Friday's got a buster. Is
that girl played by Jill Banner of Spider Baby?
So, yes.
Is that Spider Baby's Jill Banner?
And then I love the episode where they go on a talk show. It's a counterculture talk show.
Yeah, Howard Hessman is on that, and it's a great straw man episode. I don't think we need cops. And we laugh at it as a joke, but what was the big thing 2 years ago? Get rid of cops. Can't believe that was a political loser.
They had a really great, great line in that. They said something like, not even great line. I'm like, it's one of those like where you go, oh, jeez. It's like the host goes to my left or to my right, and the guy goes, not politically. Oh.
And also, I believe, that is a great episode. Again, that you even if you don't remember that you have to look these up to see, because it's everything that we're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
But it's whereas before it was an argument and now it's a knife fight. But it was defund the police in 1966.
1966. Well,
one of the guys in the audience that asked a question is Lou Wagner, who was later in Planet of the Apes. He was Lucius.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
And there's also and here's a question from Mustafa Fist Clench. It's like the most stereotypical black radical. It's amazing.
There was a guy that a Hispanic guy, and he asked the question, and Joe Friday goes, well, you're about 5'2". You don't meet the requirements of the height, because he applied to be a police officer.
Exactly.
Like, oh boy.
And you say marijuana is bad for me in the long term, Officer Friday. Like, there's a lot of great. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is a great show.
But it is everything. It's like everything old is new. Like, it's like all of this stuff, all of these culture battles are being played now, but they're just so turned up so much stronger. I was having this conversation this morning with someone else. Like, yeah, Jack Webb was super right wing, but he was right wing for 1967, which makes him a moderate Democrat today. Yeah. The right wing is so far off, and there is an episode where I don't know if it's another cop or somebody, and they have a militia.
Yeah,
and they're going after
there's
criminals.
the right-wing militia. That's actually the second episode.
Oh,
there's
is that the
right-wing
second
militia episode? Yeah.
So and he goes after them as well.
Mm-hmm. And he says something like, there's a really great line in that. And he says something along the lines of, you've been harping on minorities, but guess what, pal? You're a psycho. And you're a minority too.
Yeah, I know. It's
great.
Yeah, it's true. It's really again, like I would deal with those conservatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's the difference in our political discourse. And a friend of mine said it best. We've gone from I'm right and you're wrong to I'm right and you're evil.
And you're Hitler.
Yes, we have to cheat in elections now because Democrats can't get in office. They eat babies and they're evil, So
true.
Yeah, if you think that, you will justify anything,
Very true.
It's a shame. But that's really interesting is that you're not at what people think of in terms of the 60s protest. Mm-hmm. You're still in the kind of the fun pop culture 60s.
Yeah.
But there is already an awareness that America, there are like the fact that Batman, they're already making fun of that sort of macho superhero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is new.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Played tongue in cheek. And the Green Hornet, which came out in September of 66, that's quite the opposite. The Green Hornets played straight and didn't succeed.
Oh, I didn't. I knew that the Green Hornet. I didn't know that the Green Hornet came out the same time as Batman. I thought Batman
came out in January of 66.
And the Green Hornet came out in September.
September.
Okay. So, and Batman was twice a week.
Twice a week, yes.
Which is
so popular. It was just twice a week, which is absolutely incredible.
2 new episodes a week. No, they didn't rerun.
Cliffhanger. There was a cliffhanger episode. So,
right.
which is absolutely incredible.
When you think about Batman, how they did it,
the movie Batman the movie, the 1966 movie, was supposed to be the vehicle to introduce the characters. But ABC needed something,
right,
and so they jumped the gun and put it on a season. Or half a season earlier.
The analogy that I would put is 4 years ago when Stranger Things came out and it was just this huge thing. And then the minute it wrapped, there was also a Stranger Things movie opening in a week. I
had no idea. Yeah. And so Batman and Green Hornet were on at the same time. And they had the same producer, William Dozier.
William Dozier, yep.
And so the Green Hornet, so
which
that
gave the world Bruce Lee.
Yes, gave the world Bruce Lee, and I talk about in the book. And I was, several actors did audition for the role. One, Jan Murray, comedian.
I didn't know to play Cato.
Jan Murray did. There is a pilot episode with a short pilot with Jan Murray, and also Michael Lipton. He was a character actor,
right
at the time. So both of them auditioned with Bruce Lee. So there is that out there. So, but then we got Van Williams on that one, who was on Bourbon Street Blues, or Bourbon Street Beat, not Bourbon Street Blues. Bourbon Street Beat, Surfside 6, and he actually did a pilot that season for a submarine show called Locate, Pursue, and Destroy that never aired.
The title just falls off your tongue.
So we get that.
Did you see the new LPD? But what's fascinating when I read this, that when Bruce Lee first started with Cato, one, they wanted him to just punch and flip, like they wanted him to do like typical Western fighting, and he's like one of the leading martial artists in the world. He's like, well, let me do what I do,
some other stuff.
Yeah, let me do. But he was so fast that the camera wouldn't pick it up.
Yeah.
They actually had to go, you have to slow down because the camera's missing it.
There's really cool test footage of him trying out with it, and he's wearing a slim fitting suit. And I'm going, this is incredible.
I also heard another story. I don't know if you know this, like that people on the set, like you'd feel like a fly or something go by your face, and then you'd look and it was Bruce, and he had so much control that he was like doing kicks and punches that would come like a fraction away from your face.
He's good. He was good.
And he would just like smile. But then what happened was he was going to do that to somebody, and somebody called him, and he turned.
Oh.
And Bruce destroyed his jaw.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I think he stopped doing it.
I think that's when he would stop.
Yeah. But I didn't realize that the Green Hornet was that Lee, the guy that played the Green Hornet, was
Van Williams.
Van Williams. He didn't do the Adam West, or did he not do the Adam West sort of false bravado, or could he not do it?
He could not. So that was kind of the directive from the top. It was the Green Hornets played straight. Unlike Batman is camp, and that was from the top. This Batman is absolutely camp. Green Hornet, we're playing completely straight. He's not doing this, like I said, false bravado, and and it just didn't work out. It just didn't work for the time.
I never realized that. That's really interesting. And people don't understand, because we grew up watching Batman on in the afternoons, and you just assumed it was a kid show.
Right.
But it's not. It's an adult show, and it's a comedy, and it's basically 10 degrees shy of The Naked Gun. It's 10 degrees shy of Police Squad.
Yeah.
It's just you just need a little nudge to put it into Police Squad, but there's at least one or two great Police Squad laughs per episode.
There's a lot,
and people don't realize that it's a comedy.
Yeah. There is a lot of news articles that I pulled up from the time where it was an adult show. It seemed to be this hip thing in Hollywood, where people were going to bars and things to watch Batman when it came on.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was a number of nightclubs switched their name over to like Wayne Manor or the Bat Cave. So they had that going on. There was one. It was Arthur Murray was somewhere and
the
teaching
dance
people
school?
how to
doing the Bat-Tusi?
Arthur Murray teaching people how to do the Bat-Tusi. So it became this cool hip thing for a season.
It was. I don't know when the last time a TV series did that, where it just like everybody in the culture bought into it. The one I remember specifically was Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
and apple pie and coffee parties to watch Twin Peaks.
Maybe like the Seinfeld's finale. I could see that.
But just like everybody, like for a season, everybody was into this one thing. I'm sure there's been something since then that I missed because I had kids or whatever. I'm sure there's like a Real Housewives of whatever or some, I know that like Squid Games was pretty big for a while, but yeah.
It's hard to get everybody on the same page.
It's hard, because everybody's in their own little bubble. But yeah, I remember Twin Peaks in 1991. There'd be Twin Peaks parties, and you go, and there'd be cherry pie and coffee. And you wanted
So the other thing that I kind of touched on a bit with Batman also is, again, and we'll get back to the Green Hornet with it, is that it was kind of meant for kids, but they really started leaning on in the last season. The ratings started declining, and they said, "Well, we need kids back." So who were the guest stars? Okay, are you ready? Rudy Valley,
Otto Preminger,
Joan Collins, Ethel Merman, Zsa Zsa Gabor, and Milton Berle, and Honey Youngman. That's a great way of getting kids.
Kids love Uncle Milty.
Henny Youngman.
Yeah, I remember Otto Preminger was the first.
Otto
Mr.
Preminger,
Freeze.
yes, Mr. Freeze. Great, just great. No, I'm going. I started looking at this, going, well, that's no way to get kids to watch your show again.
But there's
somebody hip. I said Frank Gorshin's the hippest guy on the show.
They had so many weird tropes, and they would have like celebrities would pop out of the windows in their. I mean, it was just it really was. It's hard to imagine how hip and big it was at the time. Just bananas, and you see that also in like. It's all over the culture. Andy Warhol's pop art was really, the cartoon art and panels, and it was definitely a moment where people started to take making fun of American mythology. I mean, that's the only way to put it. And yet at the same time, there's all of these shows that are still Westerns are on the decline, and World War II shows are still huge. How many, I know Rat Patrol.
Rat Patrol, Combat. There was a show Jericho, which was like a Mission Impossible type show. And actually Mission Impossible came out that same year, but it was a Mission Impossible type show, but set in World War II. Hogan's Heroes, we had that season.
Which a show you could make anytime.
Absolutely.
You could do that again today.
I was looking at some articles from the time, and nobody blinked on any of it. And the only article was the only reference I even saw to, they said the Germans are played by Jewish lads. So I was like, oh, okay, great.
Wow! And was that just an aside, or
it was an aside? It was just. Yeah, it's a comedy, blah, 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 blah. The Germans are played by Jewish lads. And I'm like, oh, okay. Nobody thought anything of it.
Well, here's, to me, what I find interesting about that is like, no, you could not do a comedy today set in a Nazi prison camp. I hate to break it to you. But the people that were doing Hogan's Heroes actually dealt with real Nazis.
Yeah.
They were in the war or remembered the war. And so maybe they could deal with it because they were so close to it.
You're making fun of it.
It's like that nowadays it's horrifying. The idea of it is just like preposterous.
You know what? And my grandfather on my mother's side, he really liked Hogan's Heroes.
Sure.
And he was in the war liberating concentration camps.
Yeah.
So
I don't get it. And it's clearly deeply psychological that it allows you to process it.
Yeah.
Or, the fact that the Nazis are played as buffoons.
Yeah.
Made it easier to digest. And then it was only recently, really the early 90s, it was really the Schindler's List that in pop culture, people started to go, you know what? No, Nazis aren't buffoons. And like, I know that Steven Spielberg says like, no more cartoon Nazis. Indiana Jones is not fighting Nazis anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's like no more cartoon Nazis.
No more cartoon Nazis.
Yeah, it's
right.
Yeah, it's a very And now half the country celebrates them. It's like, see what happened?
We need more cartoon Nazis.
Yeah. Up until 1966, with one or two exceptions, there were no adult science fiction.
No. Yeah, well, I guess you could maybe throw the Twilight Zone in there.
Well, I was in the Twilight Zone
and Limits.
I would put the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits were anthologies that I would put in the same bucket as Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Boris Karloff's Thriller. Yes, absolutely fantastical science fiction. Dealt
more
with
anthology,
but adult themes. There were no anything that was a recurring show was Ronnie Rocket or whatever it was. It was Corbett, Ronnie Corbett.
No, Tom Corbett, Space
Corbett,
Ranger, and then there was Rocky Jones.
Right, Rocky Jones. But then in 66, you have Star Trek and Lost in Space.
Lost in Space, yeah.
Right.
Both shows, but both shows that were, definitely meant for a little bit of an older audience.
Yeah. Do you know the Gene Roddenberry CBS story about Star? You must.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But with Lucy, or
they brought him in to when they pitched Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
He got a pretty warm welcome, and then they had him come back for a second meeting where they just started asking him all of these questions about how he planned to do this technically on a weekly budget.
Right. Oh,
and
yes.
What he found out later was they just wanted to know how he was going to do it so they could do it on Lost in Space. It was like, how do you make these cookies? We're curious.
We're just very curious about this. Yeah. Both those shows. Yeah. And then also, again, and also 66, you had your Time Tunnel. Was another show that did come on that, and The Invaders.
Right.
So you did have a number of science fiction.
And when did Voyage
shows.
to the Bottom of the Sea? Was that
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was that season as well?
Wow, so Irwin Allen.
Irwin Allen had 3 shows that season.
3-hour-long shows that all had crazy giant production requirements.
Yep.
Time Tunnel, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and Lost in Space. And they would go, the monster suits would go back and forth between shows. Yeah. And you'd see the computer, that computer panel, that's on the Sea View. What is it doing on the Jupiter 2? That's from the Sea View. And it's in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. They're just reusing everything. It's really true.
You did find that panel everywhere.
That's so funny. If you look, this is we're so in the rabbit hole now. If you go on YouTube, there is Roddy McDowell's home movie footage of making Planet of the Apes. And it's footage of him going to the 20th Century Fox lot at 6 a.m, getting on a helicopter and being flown out to Malibu to the location. And then they got into makeup on location. And as
cool.
Yeah. And as they're flying over the Fox lot, you can see the Jupiter 2 set.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you can see this. You could see the set where the Lost in Space set was. And you see where they're building Century City Mall, which used to be the back lot of Fox.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And the only reason they had helicopters, it's a very sweet story. Charlton Heston would show up to set, and they'd all be in makeup. And hey, how you doing? Good. No, I'm tired. I got here. I had to get up at 3 a.m. Why'd you have to get up at 3 a.m? Well, we have to drive to Fox, and they drive us to Malibu, and then he was like, and he was the president of SAG. He was like, no. You don't get, and then he made them helicopter them. He's like, get them a helicopter. It's insane. It's like, well, we save $40 if they sleep 4 hours a day. Yeah, I know. I'm not interested in you saving $40. Yeah, it's a very nice story. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. But I just imagine being in Los Angeles at that time. It's like everything is shooting
Everything's
at once.
being made. Yeah.
At once.
And even,
and the doors of the house band at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Like everything is happening at the same time.
That's very true. Yeah, certainly you had everything going on the Sunset Strip. You had everything culturally, television. And now even if you walk through those backlots, sometimes you're like, oh, that's where they shot Batman or whatever. But.
Exactly. And what's interesting is, and it was still, as I said, it was before it was spooky, because the street drug at the time was pot, and later it became LSD, heroin. Not that one leads to the other, but that was the escalation of LA street drugs.
Right.
And the counterculture got more, the war became a bigger issue, and things got very serious very quickly.
Yeah.
And very dangerous.
That was the sweet
dangerous.
Spot of
it's just
culture.
in that it's just in that sweet spot. It's just in that sweet spot where everybody's still kind of getting along.
Yeah.
And
and you certainly saw spurts of it. Obviously it was after Kennedy was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy, things like that. So, you're still kind of in this.
Yeah.
It's starting. The bubble's starting to burst.
Yeah. The bubble. It's ripening, but it has yet to reach putrescence. Yeah, and it's how long did that season last? Like that, it was an era of television.
September of 1966 till it would be May of 1967.
Right, but what I mean is, did this era of television and the attitude taken to the show, what did it go about, 71, 72?
Yeah, give or take. I mean, that's about the time when any show started wrapping up that were on during the time. There wasn't really anything that went on too much further than that. So yeah, certainly the era would probably end about the early 70s. And like you said, you started getting drab colors, and then with the sitcoms, you started getting kind of the more Norman Lear type sitcoms. Again, early 70s, things like that. So
talk about, because again, we look at America today, and you definitely see red states and blue states, and there's a cultural war that has been ginned up because it's profitable to the people that gin it up, and there is always a in any group of four people, two of them are going to hate the other two. It's like it's human nature, and there's always a flip side. And but I would argue that it's exacerbated by people who profit from it.
Right.
But it's always been that way, and it's what I find interesting that happens in your book. Talk about the rural purge.
The rural purge, yes. So we had a number of those Southern-themed comedies. So Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, which was one of the biggest shows.
Yeah. Now, supposedly it started before the purge. There was the rural planting.
yes, they had to plant these,
and that was when CBS specifically. Like the same year, they canceled The Twilight Zone and Playhouse 90, and they put on the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah. So in that time, so we had, like I said, Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, Mayberry RFD, which later came, but at the time was, why am I drawing a blank? Andy Griffith's Show.
Yeah, the Andy Griffith Show.
And then Gomer Pyle USMC. Right. And certainly they planted the seed of these Southern themed comedies. And, around 1971, CBS and every other channel, all these other channels, really wiped the slate of these. But
what's interesting is, so you get on one hand, you have Batman and all of these shows, and even like a traditional show like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is just it's a spy show. But it's all groovy, It's very influenced by swinging London and British fashion, British music, British haircuts. The 60s are starting to percolate.
Yeah,
as a reaction to this new thing that is scary because it's new, there's this big push of also, to balance it out, good old down-home, common sense, hound dog culture.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, there's at a time when people may not have heard a Southern accent other than television. So it's, there was a lot of back and forth of who kicked these shows off because, people were just blaming CBS president, the CBS president, William Paley, of just saying like, nope, you know what? He just doesn't like Southern values. That type of thing, because he doesn't like Southern conservative values. That was one of the claims.
That's insane to me.
So, but it was CBS was just wanted a new look. They just wanted a new look of TV shows, and really, I mean, even though those shows were popular, they started looking to the future, and that was really I think the downfall of a lot of those shows. So, the rural theme shows were slipping a little bit. And the average age of the viewer was up there as well. So, as we know with demographics, with anything, you start getting into a higher age demographic, and you don't exist to a television executive.
That is true. I just find it interesting that even then, like people are talking about the good old days, like 1966, there's a Red and Blue America, and they're marketing to both.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's right. It's already there. You had you only had 3 channels, and you had a common source of news, and people, it's just about to take off in terms of, 1968 is 2 years away.
Yeah,
and that's the first real tear in the fabric.
The Democratic convention and and
the draft, the Nixon, it's really, and I guess you see in 1968 a lot of these kind of fun, tongue-in-cheek Batman shows. It's not as innocent anymore, and they start to pale a little bit.
Yeah,
and you have to get shows. There were still groovy shows, but they were a lot more cynical, and shows where you learned a lesson. You got a lot of the 70s. You got a lot of special episodes or shows where you did learn a lesson. So it's very. I mean, and even in the late 60s, like you get Laugh In comes in and it's a comedy. It's anti-establishment. But it makes fun of hippies. It makes the innocence is gone. The innocence is gone. It was hard to do Batman in 1968. 69.
Well, it was hard when you got, you had Milton Berle on all the time.
What is the big show that is the forgotten gem of, talk about It's About Time, which is not a show.
It's About Time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's About Time is certainly a forgotten gem of the era, and only lasted 1 season. Starring Joey Ross, who was on Car 54, Where Are You? Right. And Sergeant Bilko. Right. And really the premise of the show, for anybody who never saw it, was...
It's on YouTube, by the way.
It's on YouTube, yeah.
Full episodes on YouTube.
And actually much kind of like Planet of the Apes a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Astronauts go into space, are sent back in time, and they they run into cavemen who are Joey Ross and Coca.
Imogene Coca.
Imogene Coca. Thank you.
As Shag.
Yes, and so they start helping them in their caveman problems, and it was a Sherwood Schwartz show.
Who later created the Brady Bunch.
Yes. And they said the network was about to cancel them. And he said, well, give me one more chance. Give me one more chance with this show. Let me take them to present day. So they are brought into 1966, where the cavemen now have to deal with 1966 problems. And again, only lasted one season, but really great show, really cool. And I described it as Gilligan's Island in prehistoric times.
It's very random. Lost in Space really clicked with culture. People still reference it. Time Tunnel didn't. It's like there's no reason. It's kind of the same. It's like Land of the Giants didn't. Voice of the Bottom of the Sea did. In terms of still being referenced.
Yeah, it's about time. Time Tunnel certainly was forgotten, and certainly, Time
Tunnel was a very interesting show because it was kind of like an anthology show.
It was kind of like an anthology, and certainly referenced later. Quantum Leap, certainly influenced that type of show. The Invaders that we talked about.
So many shows are The Fugitive.
Yeah,
The Fugitive was this very popular show in the mid '60s.
Yeah, it was on during the time. Yeah,
yeah, but the movie was based a guy falsely accused of murder, looking for the guy that murdered his wife, and as he travels the country, he meets people and has adventures. And
that's the same thing with the Invaders. It's a guy sees aliens and travels the country trying to find people.
Right, and it was also
we've also seen them.
Yeah, but it was also that plot was also Kung Fu. It was also The Incredible Hulk. It was also all these shows when they don't know what to do, like make it The Fugitive.
And then also another one, Hornet Blue. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
No, never heard of it.
That was a Larry Cohen television show, and a guy wakes up, he has amnesia, and the only thing he could remember is the phrase "Coronet Blue."
Wow.
And Frank Converse was in it. And there's these guys chasing him, and he doesn't know why.
What a great idea.
Yeah. And he doesn't know why. All he can remember is Coronet Blue. Unfortunately, the show was canceled before we figured out what happened.
It sounds like a great idea.
Larry Cohen did give an explanation of what was going on. So.
I've never heard of that show, and it's a great
cool
idea.
Frank Converse is really great in it. It's cool.
Frank Converse later to co-star in Moving On with Claude Akins, one of the better truck driving shows.
Everybody, there's very few good truck driving shows.
No, I remember Moving On. Moving On was like 1976 or 7, and it was they were truckers. That was a big thing in America in the late 70s.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I got to look that up. Coronet Blue. What a great idea. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was that was on PrimeTime, because was that not a British show, or was it an American show?
No, that was American.
The Avengers
was British.
The Avengers was British, and The Saint was British.
Yes.
But they were running. Were they running PrimeTime?
Yes.
American network television.
Yes. So both of them were indeed American shows. And then also that season you had Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Girl from U.N.C.L.E.
Right. And did The Prisoner ever run?
Prisoner never ran PrimeTime.
Okay.
That was always
way too smart. Way too smart. All of these shows have ties to James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick McGoohan, who was the star of Secret Agent Man and The Prisoner, was offered the role of James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
He turned it down because he was Catholic and objected to the morality of the show. The Saint starred Roger Moore, who later became James Bond. Honor Blackman, who was on the Avengers before Diana Rigg, was Pussy Galore and Goldfinger.
Yep.
Delighted in saying her character's name. There's a very famous publicity still of Honor Blackman standing on the beach, and written in the sand in front of her in big words is "Pussy." I mean, it's pretty alarming. And in the movie, in Goldfinger, he wakes up and she's standing in front of him, and she goes, "I am Pussy Galore," and he says, "I must be dreaming." I mean, but all of these things came from James Bond, or were tied into James Bond.
Yeah,
and the Man from U.N.C.L.E.
that was again one of the first incarnations of my book in terms of ideas, talking about James Bond. And I started talking about TV, and I said, okay, well, the first 3 James Bond movies were in years previous.
Right.
And so out of that, we got Get Smart, which obviously had a ton of James Bond references. Man from U.N.C.L.E., Girl from U.N.C.L.E., I Spy, even Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible.
And Ian Fleming was involved in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I know that he came up with the name Napoleon Solo.
Yeah. I did know that.
Do you watch anything current, or are you still... living on MeTV.
I'm living on MeTV mostly, but I do like Better Call Saul, things like that. That's a good show.
Yeah, I find myself, because of my wife and children. I live in she'll be my wife August 19th. She will wake up that morning, my girlfriend, and go to bed that night, my ex-girlfriend, because she will then be my wife. I live with people that force me to stay current, so I watch new stuff, but I also like
Svengoolie current. He's current, right?
Yeah, it's a new episode. It's a new episode this week. Yeah, and Star Trek Strange. I tried,
Star Trek. Okay, I like Star Trek.
Well, then, the new Strange New Worlds I liked.
It's good. It's not CGI heavy. There's certainly
and it's the closest to the show.
Yes,
it's like it only took them 8 series to realize that what people liked was that thing that they liked.
I know the Captain Pike is cool too. He's a good.
He's great.
I like him.
He's great. Him. I did not approve of their Kirk.
No.
There was like Kirk is not Frank Burns. He had a very Larry Linville kind of quality to him. But no, I thought it was fine. I thought it was fine. But people will come up to you. There's so much television. I like Stranger Things. But people will come up to you and they'll ask me about a show and I will not have heard of it. And then to give it some context, they will reference another show that I've never heard of. It's like, have you seen?
It's kind of like this other show you've never heard.
Yeah. Have you watched Gas Pump Dwarves? No, I don't know it. It's from the producer of Wigwam Cemetery. I don't know that one either. I don't know what it is. I have a life. I can't keep up with all of this stuff. But yeah, I'll definitely put on a Dragnet or something. It's just like mac and cheese.
Dragnet is, and
right. I like seeing what Los Angeles, because it's my neighborhood. It's like, the bookstore used to be a movie theater. Oh, the Urban Outfitters was a baby furniture store. The gas station was a bank. It's like
on Sunday, my father was over at my house, and I was like, what did we wind up watching? The Monster That Challenged the World.
Nice.
An episode of Bilko and an episode of Superman. And I was like,
perfect.
Wow, okay, perfect evening.
Yeah, perfect. And again, Superman, you have to go, there are these jokes that are just brilliant diamonds. And 2 of them are about Superman. I only know the author of one of them. And the first one is David Brenner. Had a joke about Superman, which was, if you watch on Superman, they would shoot Superman 6 times and he would just stand there and let the bullets bounce off his chest. And then they would throw the gun at him and he would duck. And the other one is, I don't know the author of the joke, but it was brilliant. It was like, the first 2 people that thought Superman was a bird in a plane. What's all the excitement? Yeah, no, just brilliant. And I keep telling people about Batman. Batman was many of the episodes about written by my friend's dad, Lorenzo Semple.
Oh, okay.
My friend Maria Semple's dad. And she wrote Where'd You Go, Bernadette? And all that stuff. And it's like that show is it's the predecessor to Police Squad.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. They would land in the bat parachute and eject the parachute and run off, and then a van would drive up that said like bat parachute cleanup truck. They would just. There's an Instagram of just signs from Batman. Yeah, no,
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, there's a lot of really. It's like Robin's falling and Batman throws the Batarang and he's tied up, so he catches it with his teeth and he pulls him up by his teeth. He's like, thank God I take good care of my teeth, Batman. He goes, proper dental hygiene. The first tool of any crime fighter. They knew, they had to know what they were doing.
Oh yeah.
What's
it called? Signs.
I'll have to look it up. It's Batman's bat signs or Batman signage. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So, what you're working on the Drew Friedman documentary? What else? What else are you working on now?
So right now, I am working on the Drew Friedman documentary a little bit, and again, the book on garage rock from the 60s garage rock. Like I said, I'm a professor, so I'm in my summer time now.
So like me, your TV is tuned to MeTV, and your car radio is tuned to Underground Garage.
Yeah. Yes. That's actually yes. That's all. It doesn't leave Underground Garage, and
we are the same. We're except. I will say this about Underground Garage. I hear who's the guy that
Steven?
The Asbury Jukes. What's that?
Southside.
Yeah, I hear a lot more Southside Johnny than I would normally ever choose to listen to. But aside of that, that's fine.
That's true. And then because I also I am a glutton for punishment. I'm a township commissioner in the town that I live in.
Oh God,
So I'm I deal with a lot of potholes, and
you're the man.
I'm the man, yeah. And then we have the President Biden is coming tomorrow.
Oh,
so
you're kidding!
I have to be there for that. So.
Are you gonna meet the man, or?
I believe so.
Oh wow, that's cool. The book is PrimeTime, 1966-1967. It's about so much more, and it's really, it's a great book to always have with arm's reach. It's really great. Tom Beef Stew Shubilla, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very, very much.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould bound. We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley, with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Hey, if you like the show, why don't you drop us a line at show@danagould.com. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out! You want me? Peace out!